The Chicago City bus groaned to a halt at its final stop of the night. Inside, Liam Carter, a 35-year-old bus driver with weary eyes, sighed as he wiped the sweat from his brow. The summer heat clung to the air, even as the clock neared midnight. After 12 grueling hours behind the wheel, all Liam wanted was a quiet drive back to the depot and the solace of his small apartment. As the last passenger stepped off, Liam prepared to close the doors when he noticed movement outside. A small dog, scruffy and golden, darted into view, barking frantically and pawing at the bus door. "Hey, buddy, what's the matter?" Liam muttered, his hand hovering over the door switch. The dog's desperate eyes met his. And for a moment, Liam froze. This wasn't the look of a stray begging for scraps, it was something else. Urgency. Panic. The dog barked again, then ran a few feet away before turning back, as if urging him to follow. "Come on, man." A voice called from the back. A lone passenger, a middle-aged man in a rumpled suit, glared impatiently. "I've got places to be." Liam glanced at the dog, then at the passenger. His training told him to stay on schedule, but his gut said otherwise. "I'm sorry," Liam called out, grabbing the first aid kit from beneath his seat. "I need to check this out." "You've got to be kidding me," the passenger groaned, but Liam ignored him. He stepped off the bus. Following the dog as it dashed down a darkened alley, the alley reeked of garbage and damp asphalt. Liam stumbled over a broken crate as the dog stopped near a pile of cardboard boxes. Its barking turned into a soft whine, its nose nudging something hidden in the shadows. "What is it, boy?" Liam asked, crouching down. His heart skipped a beat as he moved the boxes aside, revealing a frail figure lying on the ground. It was an elderly woman, her silver hair matted against her pale face. Her frail body trembled, and her breathing was shallow. Liam's pulse quickened as he noticed a medical alert bracelet on her wrist. He squinted to read the engraving, "Margaret Hayes, diabetes." "Oh no," Liam whispered. He remembered the first aid training he'd taken last year. Low blood sugar could be deadly if untreated. "Hang in there," Liam said, pulling his phone from his pocket. "I'm calling for help." The woman's eyes fluttered open, her lips moving faintly. "Buddy," she rasped, her gaze shifting to the dog, who whined and nuzzled her hand. Liam's throat tightened. "You've got a good friend here, As he dialed 911, a small crowd gathered at the mouth of the alley. A young woman stepped forward, holding out a bottle of orange juice. "This might help," she said. "Perfect timing," Liam said, unscrewing the cap and carefully lifting Margaret's head. He coaxed her to sip the juice, relief washing over him as her color began to return. The sound of distant sirens grew louder, and soon, paramedics arrived. As they worked to stabilize Margaret, Liam stood back, his gaze falling on the dog Buddy, who refused to leave her side. "You saved her, didn't you?" Liam murmured. Buddy barked softly, his tail wagging just once, as if to confirm. The ambulance's red and blue lights reflected off the alley walls as the paramedics prepared to transport Margaret to the hospital. Buddy whimpered as they lifted her onto the stretcher, his eyes never leaving her pale face. "She'll be okay," one of the paramedics assured Liam. "It's a good thing you found her when you did." "Not me," Liam replied, glancing at Buddy. "He's the hero tonight." The paramedic smiled. "Dogs like him are special. You should keep an eye on him." As the ambulance drove away, Buddy sat at the edge of the alley, his tail wagging slightly as though waiting for permission to follow. Liam crouched beside him, scratching behind his ears. "Hey, boy. You've done enough for one night. How about some food and a place to rest?" Buddy looked up at him, his expressive eyes full of trust. Liam sighed. "All right. Come on, then." Back at Liam's modest apartment, Buddy sniffed around cautiously before settling on an old rug near the couch. Liam rummaged through his pantry, eventually finding a can of tuna and setting it down on a plate. "It's not much," Liam said, watching Buddy devour the food, "but it'll do for now." As Buddy ate, Liam sank into the couch, his mind replaying the events of the night. He couldn't shake the image of Margaret lying helpless in the alley, or the unwavering determination in Buddy's eyes as he led him there. "You're something else," Liam murmured, glancing at the dog. "I don't know what your story is, but you're welcome to stay as long as you need." Buddy wagged his tail as if he understood, then curled up on the rug, his breathing steady and calm. The next morning, Liam called the hospital to check on Margaret. A nurse informed him that she was stable but still under observation. Feeling a sense of responsibility, Liam decided to visit her after his shift. "Stay here and behave," he told Buddy as he left for work. The dog tilted his head but didn't move from his spot near the door. At the hospital, Liam found Margaret sitting up in bed, her frail hands resting on the blanket. Her face lit up when she saw him. "You," she said, her voice soft but warm. "You're the one who helped me." Liam smiled. "I just followed Buddy. He's the real hero." "Buddy," Margaret whispered, her eyes misting over. "He's been with me for years. My late husband brought him home as a puppy. He's all I have left." Liam hesitated, then said, "I brought him to my place last night. He's safe." Margaret's expression softened. "Thank you. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "There's no need," Liam replied. "I just did what anyone would." Margaret shook her head. "Not everyone would have stopped. You're a good man." Over the next few days, Liam visited Margaret regularly, often bringing updates about Buddy. The dog seemed to have made himself at home in Liam's apartment, though he always perked up when Liam mentioned Margaret's name. On the day Margaret was discharged, Liam brought Buddy to the hospital. The reunion was nothing short of magical. Buddy leapt into Margaret's lap, licking her face as she laughed through tears. "You missed me, didn't you?" "Boy," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Liam watched the scene with a smile, but as he drove them home, a strange feeling settled in his chest. For the first time in years, his life felt connected to something bigger, something meaningful. For weeks after Margaret returned home, Liam found himself dropping by her small house on the outskirts of Chicago whenever he could. He'd bring groceries, fix leaky faucets, and even walk Buddy when Margaret was too tired. What started as a sense of duty had grown into something deeper, a genuine bond with the elderly woman and her remarkable dog. One crisp autumn afternoon, Liam knocked on Margaret's door, a bag of fresh produce in hand. Buddy barked once before rushing to the door, his tail wagging furiously. Margaret opened it with a smile, though her face seemed more tired than usual. "Liam, you're too kind," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "Come, sit. I was just making tea." As Liam settled into the cozy living room, he noticed a stack of medical bills on the coffee table. Margaret caught his glance and sighed. "It's nothing to worry about," she said lightly. "Just the usual." "Margaret, you shouldn't have to deal with this alone," Liam said, concern etched on his face. She waved a hand dismissively. "I've managed this far. And I have Buddy to keep me company." Buddy rested his head on her lap, his soft eyes full of loyalty. Margaret smiled down at him, her hand trembling slightly as she scratched his ears. Liam hesitated, then said, "You know, you're like family to me now. If you ever need anything at all, just say the word." Margaret looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, Liam. That means more than you know." A few days later, Margaret called Liam in the middle of his shift. Her voice was weak, laced with panic. "Liam, it's Buddy. He's acting strange, won't eat, won't move. I don't know what's wrong." "I'll be there as soon as I can," Liam promised, his heart racing. He arrived at Margaret's house to find Buddy lying listlessly by the fireplace, his usual energy gone. Margaret sat beside him, her hands trembling as she stroked his fur. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's never been like this." Liam knelt beside Buddy, gently examining him. "We need to get him to a vet," he said firmly. Margaret nodded, her face pale. "Please, Liam. Help him." At the veterinary clinic, the news wasn't good. Buddy had ingested something toxic, likely from the park where Margaret had taken him earlier that week. The vet explained that they could treat him, but it would be expensive and there was no guarantee he'd pull through. Margaret's shoulders sagged as she listened, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't have that kind of money," she whispered. "I can't lose him, Liam. He's all I have." Liam didn't hesitate. "Do whatever it takes," he told the vet. "I'll cover the cost." Margaret turned to him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Liam, you can't." "I can," he said firmly. "And I will." The next 48 hours were agonizing. Margaret stayed by Buddy's side at the clinic, refusing to leave him. Liam visited every evening after his shift, bringing food and reassurance. They both watched anxiously as Buddy slowly began to improve. "He's a fighter," the vet said one evening, smiling as Buddy lifted his head for the first time in days. "I think he's going to make it." Margaret sobbed with relief, hugging Buddy gently as he wagged his tail weakly. Liam watched from the corner of the room, his own eyes misting over. That night, as they drove home, Margaret turned to Liam. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "You saved him. Again." "You've both done more for me than you realize," Liam replied. "This feels like the least I could do." Margaret smiled through her tears. "You're a good man, Liam. Buddy and I are lucky to have you." Liam glanced at Buddy in the rearview mirror, the dog's tired eyes meeting his. "No," he said quietly. "I'm the lucky one." As the days turned into weeks, Buddy's health continued to improve. Margaret and Liam resumed their routine, with Buddy regaining his usual energy and enthusiasm. But the bond between the three of them had deepened, their shared experience solidifying a sense of family that none of them had expected. One chilly November evening, as Liam drove his usual bus route, his phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket. He ignored it until he reached the depot, where he found several missed calls from Margaret. His chest tightened as he called her back. Margaret answered on the second ring, her voice shaking. "Liam, something's wrong. There's a man outside my house. He's been standing there for hours." "I'm on my way," Liam said immediately, grabbing his jacket and heading for his car. When Liam arrived, the street was eerily quiet. Margaret's house sat in darkness except for a single light in the living room window. Buddy barked faintly from inside as Liam parked and approached the front door. Margaret opened it, her face pale. "He's gone now," she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "But he was there, Liam. Just standing and watching." "Did you call the police?" Liam asked, stepping inside. Margaret shook her head. "I was scared he'd leave before they came." Liam frowned, his protective instincts kicking in. "Let's make sure everything's locked up. I'll stay tonight." Margaret nodded, her relief evident. As they secured the windows and doors, Buddy followed them closely, his ears perked and his movements alert. That night, as Liam sat on the couch with Buddy at his feet, he couldn't shake the unease settling in his chest. Margaret dozed in her chair, but her restless movements betrayed her anxiety. Around midnight, Buddy's low growl jolted Liam awake. The dog stood at the window, his posture rigid. Liam moved quickly, peering outside to see a shadowy figure lingering near the edge of the property. His blood ran cold. "Stay here," he whispered to Margaret, grabbing his phone and stepping onto the porch. The man didn't flee as Liam approached. Instead, he stood his ground, his face partially obscured by the hood of his jacket. "Can I help you?" Liam called, keeping his voice steady. The man smirked. "Just checking in on Margaret," he said casually. "She's an old friend." Liam's fists clenched. "If that's true, you can call ahead next time. You're not welcome here." The man took a step closer, his tone turning sharp. "Careful, Buddy. You don't know who you're messing with." Before Liam could respond, Buddy charged onto the porch, his growl turning into a sharp bark. The man flinched, retreating a step. "This isn't over," the man said, his smirk returning. Then he turned and disappeared into the shadows. Inside, Margaret's face was pale as Liam relayed what had happened. "Do you know him?" Liam asked. Margaret hesitated, then nodded. "His name's Tom. He's a former neighbor. We had a disagreement years ago about money. I didn't think he'd come back." "Why didn't you tell me?" Liam asked, his frustration tempered by concern. "I didn't want to burden you," Margaret said, her voice trembling. "You've done so much already." Liam placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not a burden, Margaret. We'll figure this out together." The next day, Liam filed a police report, and officers began patrolling Margaret Street. But the encounter left him on edge. He couldn't shake the feeling that Tom wasn't finished causing trouble. That evening, Margaret handed Liam an old photograph of her and Buddy. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began. "About being family. I don't have much, Liam, but I have you and Buddy. And I know that if anything ever happened to me, you'd take care of him." "Margaret, nothing's going to happen to you," Liam said firmly. "Promise me," she said, her eyes welling with tears. "Promise you'll take care of him." Liam looked at Buddy, then back at Margaret. "I promise." That night, as Buddy curled up beside him, Liam stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain: he would do whatever it took to protect the people and the dog who had come to mean everything to him. The next week was tense, with Tom's ominous presence lingering in the back of Liam's mind. Despite the increased police patrols, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that Tom was waiting for the right moment to strike. Margaret tried to go about her daily routine, but Liam could see the worry etched into her face. One evening, as Liam helped Margaret sort through old photographs, Buddy began barking furiously. He sprinted to the front door, growling and scratching at the wood. Liam stood immediately, his pulse quickening. "Stay here," he told Margaret, grabbing the baseball bat he kept by the door. Buddy's barking intensified as Liam opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The night was still, save for the faint sound of rustling leaves. Liam scanned the yard, his grip tightening on the bat. Then he saw it, a figure lurking by the side of the house. "Tom!" Liam shouted, his voice echoing in the dark. "Get out of here before I call the police." Tom stepped into the dim light, his expression smug. "Relax, Liam," he said, his hands raised mockingly. "Just wanted to say hello." "You've done enough," Liam replied, his voice firm. "Leave Margaret alone." Tom sneered, taking a step closer. "You think you can protect her? You have no idea what you're dealing with." Buddy barked sharply, lunging toward Tom. The man stumbled back, startled by the dog's sudden aggression. "Take the hint, Tom," Liam said, his voice low and steady. "This ends now." For a moment, Tom seemed to consider his options. Then, with a scowl, he backed away. "You'll regret this," he muttered before disappearing into the shadows. Inside, Margaret was visibly shaken. "What if he comes back?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We'll be ready," Liam assured her. "I'm not letting him hurt you." That night, Liam stayed awake, Buddy curled up at his feet. Every creak of the house made his heart race, but the hours passed without incident. The following morning, Liam filed another report with the police. This time, they agreed to increase their surveillance, citing Tom's repeated appearances as a cause for concern. But Liam knew he couldn't rely on law enforcement alone. He installed motion-activated lights and cameras around Margaret's house, determined to keep her safe. Despite the precautions, Tom's threat hung over them like a dark cloud. Liam threw himself into his work during the day and spent his evenings at Margaret's house, keeping watch. Buddy seemed to sense the tension, sticking close to both Liam and Margaret at all times. One evening, as Liam drove Margaret home from a doctor's appointment, he noticed a car following them. His grip on the steering wheel tightened as he turned onto a side street, hoping to lose the tail. The car followed. "Margaret," Liam said, keeping his voice calm, "call the police. Tell them we're being followed." Margaret's hands shook as she dialed, her voice breaking as she explained the situation. Liam took another sharp turn, his heart pounding as the car behind them sped up. Suddenly, Buddy let out a loud bark from the back seat, startling Margaret. Liam glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Tom's face illuminated by the streetlights. "He's alone," Liam muttered. "He's not giving up." Liam made a split-second decision, steering the car toward the police station. As the station came into view, the flashing lights of a patrol car greeted them. Tom's car screeched to a halt before speeding away, disappearing into the night. Liam and Margaret sat in the car, their breaths ragged. Buddy climbed into the front seat, nuzzling Margaret as if to comfort her. "You're safe now," Liam said softly, though his voice betrayed his exhaustion. "We're not letting him near you again." Margaret clutched Buddy tightly, her tears soaking into his fur. "Thank you," she whispered. "Both of you." In the days following the chase, Tom was apprehended by the police after a thorough investigation into his actions. With a restraining order in place and charges pending, the immediate threat to Margaret was finally over. But for Liam, the experience had left a deep mark. The fear and tension of the past weeks had solidified his role as Margaret's protector, and he realized just how much she and Buddy meant to him. One evening, as the three of them sat in Margaret's cozy living room, Margaret cleared her throat. "Liam," she began, her voice softer than usual, "I've been thinking about everything that's happened. About you, Buddy, and how much you've done for me." "You don't have to thank me," Liam replied, shaking his head. "We're family." Margaret smiled, her eyes misting. "That's exactly it. You've become the family I thought I'd lost after my husband passed. I don't have much, but I want to make sure you and Buddy are taken care of together." Liam frowned, uncertain of her meaning. "Margaret, what are you saying?" She reached for a folder on the coffee table, sliding it toward him. "My will," she said simply. "I've made arrangements to leave the house to you. Buddy will always have a home, and so will you." Liam stared at her, stunned. "Margaret, I can't." "You can," she interrupted, her tone firm. "You've done more for me than I could ever repay. And knowing that you'll be here for Buddy when I'm gone, it brings me peace." Emotion welled in Liam's chest as he looked at her and then at Buddy, who wagged his tail as if in agreement. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice thick. "I promise I'll honor this." Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. Liam moved into the house with Margaret and Buddy, his small apartment a thing of the past. He took on more shifts at work to help with bills, but he always made time for walks with Buddy and evenings spent listening to Margaret's stories of her youth. Buddy, as always, was the glue that held them together. His playful antics and unwavering loyalty reminded them daily of the bond they shared. One sunny afternoon, Margaret and Liam organized a neighborhood block party to celebrate the sense of community they had rediscovered. Friends and neighbors gathered in Margaret's yard, sharing laughter and stories as Buddy roamed happily among them. As Liam grilled burgers, Margaret raised her glass to toast. "To Liam and Buddy," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "For reminding us all that family isn't just about blood, it's about love and loyalty." The crowd erupted in applause, and Liam felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. Margaret's words echoed in his mind as he glanced at Buddy, who was chasing a group of giggling children around the yard. Years later, as Liam sat on the porch of the house, now his home, he watched Buddy doze in the late afternoon sun. The memories of their journey, Margaret's rescue, Tom's threat, and the bond they had forged, played in his mind like a film reel. "Hey, Buddy," Liam said softly, scratching behind the dog's ears. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Buddy opened one eye, his tail wagging lazily. "Thanks for finding me that night," Liam added, his voice thick with gratitude. "You didn't just save Margaret. You saved me, too." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Liam leaned back in his chair, content in the knowledge that he had found a family and a purpose he hadn't even known he was searching for. With Buddy by his side, he knew he could face whatever lay ahead. Together, they were unstoppable.